Camilla tried to push Catherine out of the camera's view. William discovered the plan. Charles intervened and stopped the procession. The evidence was revealed. Catherine emerged in a stronger position. There are royal stories that disappear almost as quickly as they arrive. And then there are stories that, whether completely true, partly true, or simply presented as a dramatic reconstruction, raise a much bigger question about what happens behind the palace doors. This is one of those stories. According to the account we are examining, the drama did not begin on Gata Day itself. It allegedly began almost 2 weeks earlier, behind closed doors, during a private rehearsal at Windsor. At first glance, it was simply another ceremonial rehearsal. People were standing on their marks. Officials were checking the procession. Camera operators were working out their positions. Staff members were making sure that everyone knew where to walk, when to turn, and how the ceremony would appear on television. But according to the narrative, something changed when Camilla entered the room. She allegedly did not simply take her assigned position. Instead, she went toward the technical area and began watching the monitors. And what she allegedly saw was Catherine. Again and again, according to the story, the cameras naturally followed Catherine. There was nothing Catherine supposedly needed to do to create that attention. She was simply walking through the rehearsal. She adjusted her ceremonial clothing. She turned her head. She smiled. She interacted naturally with the people around her. But on the monitors, she allegedly stood out. And that is where the story says Camilla became concerned. The account suggests that the issue was not Catherine's official rank. It was visibility. Who would appear in the photographs? Who would dominate the television pictures? Who would become the person the public remembered when the ceremony was over? According to the narrative, Camilla allegedly believed that the answer should be herself and the king. But the cameras seemed to have another answer. They kept finding Catherine. And that allegedly led to a decision. The alleged plan. The story claims that the procession's movement plan was examined. A procession plan may sound like an unimportant piece of paperwork, but according to the narrative, it determines much more than simply who walks first. It determines spacing. It determines positioning. And, crucially, it can determine what television cameras are able to see. Move somebody a few feet to one side, and the person may still technically be participating in the ceremony while becoming almost invisible to the audience. That is the central idea behind the story. According to the account, Camilla allegedly wanted Catherine moved farther away from the main camera angles. The narrative says that Catherine could have ended up partially hidden behind the pillars inside St. George's Hall. From the public's perspective, she would still be there. But from the camera's perspective, she could effectively disappear. And this is where William allegedly entered the story. According to the account, William heard what was being discussed. The narrative portrays his reaction as immediate. He allegedly walked away from his position and confronted Camilla. His message was supposedly simple. Catherine would not be put in the shadows. The account then connects William's reaction to his memories of his mother, Diana. The story suggests that William had grown up watching his mother become increasingly controlled by the royal machinery around her. According to the narrative, he remembered how decisions about positioning, staff, access, and public appearances could gradually change someone's public image. So when he allegedly heard that Catherine might be deliberately moved away from the cameras, he supposedly interpreted it as something much more serious than a minor logistical adjustment. He saw a pattern, and he allegedly decided that pattern would not repeat itself with his wife. 12 days of silence. Then came 12 days of silence. According to the story, Camilla did not openly continue the argument. There was no public confrontation, no dramatic announcement, no obvious royal feud. Everything appeared normal. But the narrator argues that the silence was not acceptance. It was preparation. And this becomes one of the most important themes in the story. Camilla allegedly began working behind the scenes. The account claims that she created a handwritten version of the procession arrangement. It supposedly showed William and Catherine separated by a gap. And that gap allegedly existed for one reason: to create space for Camilla. The story describes it almost like a blueprint. One page, one gap, one arrow. And, according to the narrative, that small change could completely alter the television image. If Camilla stepped into that gap, Catherine could become partially blocked. For a live broadcast, even a few seconds could be enough. The audience might see William. They might see Camilla. and Catherine could be reduced to a shoulder, a sleeve, or almost nothing at all. That is the alleged strategy at the heart of the story. The assistant's dilemma. According to the narrative, Camilla then allegedly instructed an assistant to place the handwritten document inside the official operations folder. The assistant supposedly understood the seriousness of the request. The official procession plan had already been approved. Changing it without authorization could create serious consequences for palace staff. But the story claims that the assistant felt unable to refuse. He allegedly took the handwritten page, crossed the castle, entered the operations room, opened the official binder, removed the approved chart, and inserted Camilla's handwritten version. The narrative emphasizes the assistant's fear. His hands were allegedly shaking. He supposedly knew that he was doing something that could cost him his career. But he did it anyway. And then comes the twist. According to the account, William was allegedly watching. William's secret preparation. The story claims that William had arranged for a recording device to monitor activity in the operations room. The purpose, according to the narrative, was to document what happened. So when the assistant allegedly entered the room and changed the paperwork, William supposedly saw everything. He allegedly watched the official folder being opened. He watched the approved page being removed. He watched the handwritten replacement being inserted. And he reportedly saved the recording. But William supposedly did not immediately confront Camilla. Instead, he allegedly took the evidence to his father. That decision is important because it transformed the conflict. It was no longer simply William versus Camilla. It became an institutional question. Would the king allow an unofficial change to the procession? Would the royal household permit William and Catherine to be separated during a globally televised ceremony? Or would the official order remain intact? According to the story, Charles chose the latter. Charles enters the story. The narrative claims that William showed Charles the recording. Charles allegedly watched the footage carefully. The king supposedly understood immediately what could happen if the altered plan were used. Imagine the scenario described in the story. Thousands of people are watching. International media are broadcasting. Diplomatic guests are present. Cameras are positioned around the route. And suddenly the king's wife appears to move between the future king and the future queen. The image could become the story. It could overshadow the ceremony itself. According to the account, Charles therefore decided to create a formal written instruction. The alleged order stated that William and Catherine would remain together throughout the procession. And, according to the narrative, anyone attempting to break that approved arrangement could be removed from the formation. This was supposedly not a suggestion. It was an order. The story says Charles then gave the document to Princess Anne. And that is when the situation became even more dramatic. Why Anne mattered? The narrative portrays Anne as the perfect person to enforce such an instruction. She is presented as someone who understands ceremony, protocol, discipline, and royal responsibility. According to the account, Charles knew that and would not hesitate if she believed an instruction needed to be carried out. She would not negotiate. She would not become emotional. She would not worry about appearances. She would simply do what she had been instructed to do. And that is exactly what the story claims happened. The alleged instruction went into Anne's possession. She supposedly understood that if Camilla attempted to disrupt the formation, she was authorized to intervene, even if cameras were watching, even if thousands of people were present, even if the person involved was the king's wife. Gata Day arrives. Then came the ceremony. According to the story, Windsor was filled with spectators. The atmosphere was ceremonial and traditional. The procession moved through the grounds. The cameras were ready. The crowd watched. And Camilla allegedly believed everything was going according to her plan. She supposedly believed the altered arrangement was in the official folder. She allegedly believed the staff would follow it. She apparently had no idea that the arrangement had already been corrected. And she allegedly did not know that William had evidence. Then the procession reached the critical point. According to the narrative, Camilla suddenly increased her pace. She moved diagonally through the formation, and she stepped directly between William and Catherine. For a brief moment, Catherine was allegedly blocked. Her arm was reportedly caught by Camilla's movement. The fabric of the ceremonial clothing allegedly created a visual barrier, and the camera view changed. For approximately a second or two, according to the account, Catherine was barely visible. That was allegedly the moment Camilla had wanted. But it did not last. Because Anne was watching. The white glove. The story describes the next moment as almost cinematic. A white glove went into the air. And stopped. The procession stopped. The band stopped. The crowd became quieter. And suddenly everyone understood that something unusual had happened, according to the narrative, and then walked back toward Camilla. She allegedly stood directly in front of her, and she reportedly told her to return to her position. The exact words are not established by the source, but the story presents them as essentially, "Back to your place." Anne allegedly did not repeat herself. She simply waited. That detail is important in the story, because it suggests that the confrontation did not require shouting. It did not require physical force. It did not require a public argument. One person gave an instruction. Another person was forced to obey. Camilla allegedly realized that the situation had completely changed. The official arrangement was not hers anymore. The king's instruction had taken precedence. Anne was enforcing it in front of everyone. William protects Catherine. According to the account, William then moved toward Catherine. He allegedly took her hand, and together they continued toward the chapel. The crowd reportedly noticed. The cameras noticed. And the story claims that applause followed. What was supposed to be a moment in which Catherine allegedly disappeared from view instead became a moment in which attention shifted directly toward her. That is the irony at the heart of the narrative. The alleged attempt to reduce Catherine's visibility supposedly had the opposite effect. It made people look even more closely, behind the closed doors. But the story says the real confrontation began after the public ceremony. Once the chapel doors closed, the outside world could no longer see what was happening. According to the narrative, Camilla confronted Charles. She allegedly demanded to know how he could allow her to be humiliated in front of the entire world. The account portrays her as furious. She was supposedly the queen. She had allegedly expected the royal machinery to protect her. Instead, the machinery had stopped her, and it had done so publicly. But Charles allegedly did not respond with an emotional argument. Instead, according to the story, the evidence was waiting. The evidence appears. William reportedly placed a tablet on the table. The recording allegedly showed the assistant changing the official procession documents. Then William supposedly produced the handwritten page itself. The same page that had allegedly been created to change the arrangement. The same page that supposedly separated William and Catherine. The same page that allegedly created the space Camilla later attempted to occupy. According to the story, Camilla's confidence disappeared, because the alleged evidence meant that the incident could no longer simply be described as an accident. If the story were accurate, the document would show intent, and the recording would allegedly show execution. Together, they would create a much stronger case. Then Charles reportedly produced the sealed instruction, the document that had been prepared before the ceremony, the document that allegedly guaranteed William and Catherine's position. And, according to the narrative, Camilla finally understood that the entire situation had been anticipated. Catherine breaks down. The most emotional part of the story allegedly came when Anne spoke privately to Catherine. Catherine had reportedly maintained her composure throughout the ceremony. She had not shouted. She had not confronted Camilla publicly. She had continued walking. She had performed her role. But according to the account, Anne reminded her of Diana. The reference allegedly connected Catherine's experience with the painful history William had witnessed as a child. And that was supposedly what finally broke Catherine's composure. The narrative says that tears began to fall, not because Catherine had lost, but because the situation allegedly reminded her of something much deeper. A woman being placed in a difficult position. A woman expected to remain calm. A woman expected to smile while everyone else made decisions around her. And, according to the story, William was determined that Catherine would not have to live that way. The aftermath. The narrative then claims that consequences followed quickly. According to the account, Charles allegedly reduced some of Camilla's ceremonial responsibilities. Some joint appearances were supposedly changed. Certain privileges were allegedly withdrawn. The story even claims that a ceremonial key associated with Windsor was returned. At the same time, Catherine allegedly received stronger institutional backing. The narrative says Charles formally reinforced Catherine's position at future ceremonial events, so that there would be less room for ambiguity. The assistant who allegedly changed the document supposedly lost his position, and Camilla, according to the story, remained queen. That distinction matters. The account does not claim that her title disappeared. Instead, it portrays the consequences as a reduction in influence. She still had the title. She still had her place. But, according to the narrative, she had discovered that she could not use the machinery of the institution to push Catherine aside. What the story is really about. At its deepest level, this isn't really a story about a procession. It is a story about power. It is about who controls the image, who decides who stands where, who gets the center of the frame, and who has the authority to stop the machinery when something goes wrong. The alleged confrontation between Camilla and Catherine becomes symbolic because Catherine represents the future of the monarchy in the narrative. William is the future king. Catherine is the woman standing beside him, and the public increasingly associates them with the next generation of the institution. That creates an unavoidable question for anyone inside the royal family. Who gets the spotlight today, and who will inherit it tomorrow? According to this dramatic account, Camilla allegedly struggled with that transition. She had spent years fighting for her place. She had eventually become queen. But the story claims that she still felt threatened by the popularity of William and Catherine, and that insecurity allegedly drove the decision that ultimately backfired. William's motivation. The narrative also gives William a deeply personal motivation. According to the story, William was not simply protecting Catherine's position. He was protecting her from a pattern he believed had harmed his mother. The account repeatedly returns to Diana. The argument is that William had seen what happened when institutional decisions gradually pushed a royal woman away from the center. First it is a small change, then another, and eventually the person is still technically present but no longer controls the way the public sees her. According to the narrative, William refuses to allow that process to happen again. That makes his alleged response to the procession more than a disagreement. It becomes a personal boundary. Catherine will not be pushed into the shadows while William is standing beside her. Catherine's alleged new position. And this is where the story ends. The person who allegedly started at risk of disappearing from the cameras ends up becoming the center of attention. The person who allegedly tried to control the image loses control of the image. The king allegedly intervenes. The princess royal allegedly stops the procession. William allegedly stands beside his wife. And the alleged evidence is eventually placed on the table. Whether every detail happened exactly as described is a separate question. The source itself acknowledges that parts of the account are interpretation rather than confirmed reporting. But as a dramatic royal narrative, the structure is remarkably clear. A private rehearsal creates tension. An alleged plan is created. William discovers it. Charles is shown the evidence. A formal order is issued, and receives the instruction. Camilla allegedly attempts the maneuver anyway. The procession stops. Catherine remains beside William. The evidence is revealed, and the balance of power allegedly shifts. In the end, the most powerful image in the story is not Camilla stepping between William and Catherine. It is William taking Catherine's hand after the interruption and continuing forward. Because that moment represents the entire message of the narrative. The attempt to separate them allegedly failed. The attempt to control the cameras allegedly failed. The attempt to reshape the procession allegedly failed. And instead of Catherine disappearing into the background, the controversy allegedly made her more visible than ever. That is why the story presents the Gata-Day incident as a turning point. Not simply because a procession stopped. Not simply because a royal figure was allegedly embarrassed. But because, according to the narrative, the institution itself chose to stand behind William and Catherine. And once that happened, the story argues, the balance inside the royal family could never quite be the same again. Camilla allegedly wanted control of the picture. William allegedly protected his wife. Charles allegedly protected the institution, and allegedly enforced the order. And Catherine, despite supposedly being the person pushed toward the edge of the frame, ultimately became the person at the center of the entire story. Subscribe our channel for more royal news or update.